It is such a moment in Cuba. People wait for it, are drawn to it, listen to every step of it on national radio. 2.5 million people, that's more than 20% of the entire country, coming out annually to run in remembrance of a hero. Not theirs, ours. Terry Fox. There is no bigger Terry Fox run outside Canada than the one in Cuba. A little social solidarity among friends, a relationship built long ago. What is this thing, though, that Canada and Cuba have? They seem to have been flirting with each other for quite some time.
I think flirting is a very good word.
John Kirk, a Canadian who's a scholar on Cuba, was an admitted fan of Fidel Castro and talks of the Canada-Cuba rapport as one of chemistry.
So we were flirting with each other, and John Diefenbaker, a populist from the prairies, decided to give Cuba the benefit of the doubt. 1962, pressure comes from Washington to Canada and to all of Latin America. Break with Cuba. And every country in Latin America and the Caribbean, other than Mexico and Canada, broke relations with Cuba.
Consider this, he says, of all the U.S. presidents and Canadian prime ministers Fidel Castro saw come and go, he only really built a rapport with one person, one prime minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. The same Trudeau who in 1960 got the bright idea to paddle a homemade canoe from Florida to Cuba. Stopped by the elements, then mocked by politicians at home. Mocking that only got worse when he became prime minister and reached out to Cuba politically and personally.
Pierre Trudeau was the first leader of a Western industrial nation to step on Cuban soil.
A not-so-subtle arrival in Havana in 1976.
The two men stood at attention while the national anthems were played.
The greeting could hardly be more effusive, making the whole thing so much more awkward back home.
To have the first leader of a NATO country come to Cuba and speak to 25,000 people and say, even though we disagree with each other, we have the moral values of disagreeing with each other with a basis of mutual respect. And to end up by saying, Viva Cuba, Viva la Amistad Cuba-Canada. This sort of, if you look at the media back in 1976, he was crucified. People sort of thought Trudeau had gone way too far.
At a quick news conference, Trudeau was asked if he was concerned about the people back home who were shocked by his presence in a communist state.
Well, the category of people which would be shocked by that have long since been shocked by my visit to China and to the Soviet Union, so I guess I can't worry about that. I've been to those two countries several years ago, and I don't think Canada has veered notoriously towards communism since, so I don't see why it would happen now.
The Prime Minister, it seems, not the only one in the family charmed and content to be in Cuba. That's Margaret Trudeau, and I can't figure out if she's smiling more at her child or at Fidel.
Well, I think that the chemistry between both Trudeaus with Fidel was very good. And in the first book, which I remember reading, she said that Fidel was the sexiest man she'd ever met, and she spent the whole time flirting with him.
A thought she absolutely repeated when asked.
Oh, what a charmer. And you know why he's in power. He has got charisma coming out his ears. What a charmer.
The connections continued. Here, the former prime minister in the 90s, retired, strolling along the Malecon.
He traído armas hasta Cuba, hasta la revolución.
Pairing up with Castro again, chewing over the problems of the world. Those days, those men, now gone. But bonds of a sort remain. The Canadian embassy in Havana continues to be a frequent host to Cuban movers and shakers, and Canadians eager to do business with them, trade scientific knowledge, maintain the flow of tourists. Sometimes cozy pronouncements that surely would have made American officials once upon a time faint.
Viva la relación entre Canadá y Cuba. Viva! Viva Canadá y Cuba.
The connection between the cultures drives more than commerce. The University of Havana teaches an entire program on Canada. Curiosity keeps the classes full. Years of exchanges have resulted in some intriguing encounters.
Canadá es de la OTAN.
Canada is a member of NATO.
Nosotros no somos miembros de nada.
We are members of no organization at all.
Porque ni siquiera.
This tape has never been aired before. Fidel Castro addressing visiting Canadian dignitaries in the 90s. Then Nova Scotia Premier John Savage on the left. And on the right, there's Canada-Cuba expert John Kirk. Hearing El Comandante muse on the creature that is a Canadian.
Los amigos más firmes.
The Canadians have been our
Más
firmest
leales.
friends.
Qué lástima
What a pity, though,
que en vez de estar Estados Unidos aquí tan
that
cerca
instead of being the United States so
y Canadá
close,
más lejos,
and Canada so far
Canadá no
away,
está en el lugar de Estados
that it
Unidos y
wouldn't be all
Estados
the way
Unidos un poco
around.
más
The
para
United
allá.
States down, I mean Canada down here and the United States up there.
Beyond the political nostalgia, the economic exchanges, the tourism, there are occasionally flashes here of that connection between Canada and Cuba that you just don't see coming. Like the bull. Not just any bull, the most famous bull in all of Cuba, the 900-kilogram Rosafe to you. Once a stud star of Royal Winter Fairs in Canada, until thought to be at the end of its breeding life, Rosafe was sent to Cuba. It's just one of those stories Cuban children all learn.
Bueno, Rosafe, según tengo entendido.
Well, Rosafe, from what I understand, was a donation from the Canadian government to the Cuban government for the agricultural industry here.
What a move for Cuba. That beast still had enough oomph to go on to father effectively the entire Cuban dairy herd. One of its progeny so prolific it broke world records for milk production. Reason enough to end up on a Cuban stamp. And so in a factory accustomed to creating bronzes of the heroes of the various revolutions, years have been spent poring over as perfect a replica as possible of Rosafe. A statue actually commissioned in 1977 by Castro, but abandoned when the bronze ran out. Recently, Canadian entrepreneurs resurrected the project. The craftsmen who finished it, so proud, all wanted a shot in front of it.
You made the head.
They don't even seem to mind that once finished, the proud Canadian funders carved their names in the statue. You can probably guess what part of the bull they chose. How'd all the Cuban workers who sweated it out to build this take to that?
Not good?
They're Canadians. It's Cuba. It's okay. Friends get allowances. And while the two men who were actually once old friends are now gone, the new faces aren't so unfamiliar. The history is real enough, the connections deep enough, that those old bonds might just endure a brand new day. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Havana.